Hello and welcome to Current Issues with me, Tarun. Prime Minister Narendra Modi showered praise on Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday while the two leaders met via video conferencing while dedicating unit of Kudamkulam nuclear project in Tamil Nadu. India's first nuclear power plant, the Kudamkulam power plant, which is built by a foreign partner. Prime Minister Modi told Putin, "The strategic partnership between India and Russia shows your personal commitment, consistent support, and strong leadership in transforming the substance and character of our relationship. Personally, I have always deeply valued our friendship." End of quote. The dedication of the Kudamkulam power plant comes ahead of Putin's visit to India in October for bilateral talks and the BRICS summit at Goa. With bilateral trade between India and Russia still stuck at $10 billion, we discussed the potential of India-Russia relationship with former Ambassador Skantayal, former Ambassador Ashok Sajanar, and Alok Bansal. He's Director, CSS India Foundation. So I go to my panelist Skantayal to take his opening comment on today's discussion.
देखिए, भारत और रशिया के जो संबंध हैं वो तो बहुत पुराने हैं, बहुत गहरे हैं और उनके साथ एक हमारी जो स्पेशल एंड प्रिविलेज स्ट्रेटजिक पार्टनरशिप है। पर ये देखा है कि पिछले कुछ सालों से थोड़ा सा उसमें स्टैग्नेशन आ गया है। ट्रेड में जो बहुत कुछ करने की ज़रूरत है वो हो नहीं पा रहा है, पर एनर्जी में बहुत ज़्यादा स्कोप है। थोड़ा सा शायद रशिया में कुछ नाराज़गी है कि पहले हम ज़्यादातर अपना डिफेंस इक्विपमेंट रशिया से ख़रीदते थे, 70% से ज़्यादा हमारा रशिया से था, पर अब हम इज़राइल से, अमेरिका से, इनसे भी कुछ ख़रीद रहे हैं। तो इसको हमें बड़े अच्छी तरह समझाना होगा हमारे प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी को और राष्ट्रपति पुतिन को कि रशिया के साथ हमारे संबंध बहुत गहरे हैं और रहेंगे और उसमें डिफेंस की बहुत ज़्यादा इम्पोर्टेंस रहेगी। ट्रेड भी बढ़ाने की बहुत ज़रूरत है।
करने के लिए बोलो इनको इंग्लिश में बात
और नए नए सेक्टर जैसे इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी।
I would want to ask you if you see the bilateral trade between India and Russia, it is stuck at around $10 billion and this has been stagnating for a long time. What do you think are the reasons that the bilateral trade is still roughly about 70,000 crores a year?
See, earlier we had, in the good old Soviet days, we had the rupee-ruble trade and there was a match in what we could produce and supply and what Russia at that time Soviet Union wanted. But now as far as machinery or capital goods or consumer goods are concerned, the requirements of Russia are different, which we do not perhaps produce, and requirements of India are different, which perhaps Russia does not produce. So that is a huge challenge which will be quite difficult to overcome. Then of course there is this issue of freight and how the goods will go up to Vladivostok in the east or to the Russian coast, Odessa, etc. So you have to then concentrate on pharmaceuticals, information technology where there is a huge scope. And I believe that it can be done if both the governments put their mind to it, and there can be the growth areas, the focus areas for increasing India-Russia trade.
Okay, I am going across to former Ambassador Ashok Sajanar, who joins us on the phone line. Mr. Sajanar, I would like to ask you, is the inherent potential of the India-Russia partnership been realized? I think we lost the phone link. I'll go across to Ambassador Skantayal. Mr. Tayal, I would want to ask you, the inherent potential of the India-Russia relationship, has it been realized, or what do you expect needs to be done to realize the full potential of the two nations' relationship?
See, the whole strategic stability in Asia Pacific region, in the whole world is under some state of flux.
Okay.
New equations are emerging. You will see the tensions are rising between the West and Russia. The Russia and China are coming together. Suddenly you saw yesterday that Turkey and Russia are coming together. We are very good friends of Russia. We are very good friends of United States. And I think one of our major tasks of our leadership should be to iron out the differences which are emerging between our two great friends, United States and Russia. Because the Americans seem to be still very preoccupied with what is happening in Europe, whereas the new challenge to the world, to the entire world, is coming either from Islamic terrorism or from the rise of China.
Okay, I take your point.
Where
I'm going
India
across to former
Russia,
Ambassador Ashok
United
Sajanar,
States.
who joins me on the phone line. Ambassador Sajanar, I would like to ask you, has the full potential of the India-Russia relationship been realized after the kind of defense, say about defense procurements have been happening? But if you see the trade, it's stuck at $10 billion. How would you look at it cohesively?
You know, let me put it this way. Number one, that the pinnacle of the relationship between India and what is now Russia, what earlier was Soviet Union, that was really reached in 1971 when the Treaty of Peace, Friendship and Cooperation was signed, you know, exactly 2 days ago on the 9th of August 1971.
Yes.
That was the pinnacle. And that, you know, there was geostrategic circumstances because China, Pakistan and the United States were getting together. And they posed a threat both to India as well as to the Soviet Union. Now, coming after 1991, when the Soviet Union disintegrated, and then that Treaty of Peace, Friendship, that was thrown into, so to say, into the dustbin of history. But then after that, we've had another Treaty of Strategic Partnership in 2000, when during the first visit of President Vladimir Putin to India, the treaty was signed. And then 2010, we have the special and privileged strategic partnership between the two countries.
Yes.
Now, let me put it this way. You mentioned defense. Now, defense, India, even now, earlier, of course, more than 80% of India's defense equipment was sourced from the Soviet Union. But even today, more than 70% of our defense equipment comes from the Soviet Union.
Okay.
So defense, it continues to be a very significant supplier. There are other areas, other significant areas, like the issue of nuclear energy, for which the first nuclear power plant at Kudankulam was inaugurated yesterday by President Putin and Prime Minister Modi and the Chief Minister
Yes.
of Tamil Nadu. So that is the first one, 1,000 megawatt. The second one is being constructed. There are 4 more being constructed. When Prime Minister Modi visited Moscow last year on the 24th of December,
Yes.
then it was decided that 6 more nuclear power plants would be
So that Mr.
constructed,
Sajanar is
possibly
indeed, Ambassador Sajanar, that indeed speaks volumes of the kind of commitment that India has to the relationship, because it talks about building 6 more power plants. I'm going across to Alok Bansal of the India Foundation. I would have 2 questions for you. First, we still are very largely dependent on defense imports from Russia. It continues to be the mainstay, though we are veered towards America. But now more so, Russia, which has stood the test as a time-tested partner, they say after the oil revenues have gone down, they are looking more to export to India. How do you see this relationship playing in the next 3 to 5 years?
See, please understand, for last 4 to 5 decades, Russia has been the mainstay of India's defense preparedness. Actually, it's the bulk of the defense goods that have come from Russia. But in last year, the largest defense supplier to India became United States.
Okay,
which
that's
is a transformative thing. So it's important, but as far as our imports from Russia are concerned, they are still very, very substantial. And as far as Russia is concerned, India is one of the very, very significant buyers. Our defense forces are used to using Russian equipment. In fact, the former Soviet equipment, we are used to it, and it's proved to be sturdy. Russians have proved to be reliable partners.
Okay.
We did face certain turbulence when the Soviet Union disintegrated, and there was
But largely they have been reliable.
but now of late I think things have stabilized. The only thing is that of late Russians had become a little more market oriented, whereas the earlier the Russian goods were equipment were available at a very cheap price.
So you mean they were asking a premium?
Yeah, now I think they are competitive. Their rates are not so low as they used to be during the rupee.
Is it because the economy of Russia is not what it used to be compared to the other world? I mean, China has gone far ahead and become far larger. It's dependent heavily on energy. So is it seeking to utilize or get the maximum for the goods that it is?
No, this has happened ever since the disintegration of Soviet Union, because I think the rupee ruble trade crumbled, and then of course once the Russians were exposed to the market forces,
yes,
it became a free market economy. Then obviously the companies started quoting higher.
That's an important point. I go to Ambassador Skand Tayal. Ambassador Tayal, I would want to ask you, if you see largely the trade between India and Russia, a huge chunk is ruled by defense. Do you see this diversifying as Russia looks to diversify trade with India, or do you think it will still be dependent on the defense supplies or defense equipment? Do you see any change in that in the coming 3 to 5 years?
I think the mainstay of India-Russia trade relations, the commercial relations, would continue to be defense equipment and energy-related sector.
Certainly.
Because there we have an advantage, and Russia has been very generous to us at times. You would recall that our nuclear submarine, the technology for the reactor has come from Russia. Then they had given a nuclear submarine on lease, Russians, for our crew and our captains and our technicians to be trained. So there is a special relationship, but it is becoming, just what was said a little earlier, it is perhaps becoming a little transactional, because our experience with the whole refurbishment of Vikramaditya, the aircraft carrier, was not very happy. The prices were raised repeatedly. It took
That's a very important
long time
point,
to
Ambassador Tayal, that you're raising. Indeed,
So,
Vikramaditya became a very sore point, and it actually became the headlines of newspapers for a long time. But do you think that has affected the relationship, or these are mere blips in when you see the large scheme of things? How would you see it? Ambassador Tayal, you yourself have been posted in Moscow. I think you could give us the real picture.
I would like to believe that after all, that was a very major contract, and at that time it was after the disintegration of Soviet Union, so some facilities were in Ukraine, etc. So I think the transition period is over.
Okay.
And Russia now is in full control of the entire manufacturing chain of whatever equipment it has, it is offering.
Okay, I've taken your point.
And to that extent, I
I'm
believe
going
that
across
in future,
to Ambassador
if we
Sajanar.
go for helicopters,
Okay, I'm going across to Ambassador Sajanar. I would like to ask you, there is a paper that you wrote on the 30th of May 2016, in which you wrote Russia's supply of lethal armaments like Mi-35 attack helicopters and Su Sukhoi 35 aircraft to Pakistan can have on relations with India a serious consequence on relations with India, as all such equipment is ultimately used by Pakistan against India. Now, how would you see it? This is a comment which you wrote in the paper. How do you see this in significance with the India-Russia relations? I mean, if Russia is looking that it needs to earn some money, as defense and energy remains the mainstay of that economy, how do you say this relations between India and Russia going ahead?
You see, I still stand by that comment that I made in my article that you have referred to. Because you see, till so far, Soviet Union and Russia, they have refrained, they have desisted from supplying armaments to Pakistan. Now, to an extent, I can understand that when Russia has been pressurized so much on account of the Ukraine crisis and the prices of energy, oil and gas falling, and the mainstay is export of defense equipment and energy. And they see also that as far as the Indian market is concerned, that we have also been sourcing some of our requirements from France and the United States, that they will try to find other markets. But, we need really for them to understand that anything that we are buying from the United States or France, it is not to be used against Russia per se as such, because Russia continues to be a strategic partner and a friend. While anything that Russia supplies to Pakistan, all these sophisticated lethal equipment that it is supplying, Mi-35, Su-35, maybe Su-35, there is still a very, very big question mark on that. But all these are going to be used against India. Similarly, what we had seen that, the air missile defense system, the S-400, that is being supplied to China. Because the more sophisticated equipment that is supplied to China, the less will its attractiveness be for India.
That's an important comment. I'm going across to Alok Bansal, Ambassador Sajanar at this moment. Mr. Bansal, I would like to ask you, when you see that Russia begins supplying armaments to Pakistan, I would like to remind you of one more incident. When America wanted to supply F-18 Hornets, or one of their best planes, to Pakistan, India actually had a problem. India said, look, if you want to supply these planes to Pakistan, then it's going to be used against India. Now, same thing is happening. Russia is going ahead and selling these sophisticated air equipment to Pakistan. Do you see that as an issue, or do you think because India has also said that, okay, we can shop from elsewhere, so Russia says we also have other markets?
See, as of now, the equipment that Russia is offering to Pakistan, to my mind, is not the one which could probably pose a direct threat to India.
Okay.
Like helicopters, it's not an offensive weapon. It's actually primarily used in support of the ground forces and things like that. Secondly, I don't think so Pakistan today has the economic wherewithal to go in for these equipment. Okay. The negotiations are going on, like F-16 happened, the US curtailed the support, financial support which they were giving, and Pakistan had no way of actually going ahead. Though Pakistan's economy has been in a fairly good state at this point of time, they have for the first time in their history have concluded an IMF program successfully. But still, I don't think so Pakistan has that sort of financial muscle that it can go ahead and commercially buy large number of equipment. They can buy, of course, some aircraft and some equipment, which to my mind at this stage does not pose that sort of a threat. But of course, Russia will have to think whether it wants India or Pakistan.
That's an important comment.
Because obviously, if Russia continues to supply equipment to Pakistan, then India will have to reconsider its long-term defense relationship with Russia.
Okay.
And from Russia's point of view, it does not make economic sense to actually
do business with Pakistan.
To do business with Pakistan at the cost of India.
Okay, at the cost of it. I'm going to Ambassador Tayal. Moving on to talks on energy. Ambassador Tayal, we saw two big deals that Russia wanted to make over the past 2 or 3 years. One was the oil or the crude supplies or the gas supplies to China, a $40 billion project, I think, which has not happened or fructified as yet. For the gas supplies, this was over some disputes over the building of pipeline between the two nations or the cost of the pipeline. But Ambassador Tayal, there is also a deal between Indian companies, Essar and Rosneft concluded a very big deal to supply crude, Rosneft to supply crude to Essar in India. So do you think that India-Russia energy trade is looking for greener pastures? There is going to be more trade in energy between India and Russia, as even Rosneft plans to buy Essar's operations in India. How do you look at this energy trade relationship playing out?
I think this relationship has a lot of potential. We are seeing this deal between Essar and Rosneft, and it has a future. And now that the private sector is involved, because earlier it was ONGC which was invested in Sakhalin, it has been a very profitable investment by ONGC, and our companies will look for more and more investments in Russia for exploration, and also will buy the output. It can even be swapped in the international market, and eventually the benefit will come to India. So that will be the most lucrative and perhaps a relationship with most potential as we go forward.
Okay, I'm going to Ambassador Sajanar. How do you like now Indian private sector dealing in energy with Russians, and how do you see that whole relationship playing out? Will we see a lot of Indian corporates now doing business with Russia in energy?
I think so. I think that there is going to be a lot of development of collaboration because, as Ambassador Tayal mentioned about the Sakhalin oil and gas, that is very profitable. Then we had invested in Imperial Energy, that around 2007, 2008. That was not a very profitable investment because that was really at the highest point, and after that we had the international economic and financial crisis. But now we have sold that to Sistema, and now our private sector is getting into it, and our OVL, Desh Limited, has also been invited for prospecting in the Russian continental shelf on the Arctic Circle. So I think that also has great potential, that also has great possibilities. And I can see that about the biggest, earlier it was the OVL investment in Sakhalin 1, that was about $2 billion, and now I can see that there is going to be an investment, another fresh investment of about $5 to $6 billion in Russian energy. What I would like to say is that there is great potential in this sector in addition to nuclear energy and also in fossil fuels, hydrocarbons. There's great potential. We have not really been able to tap that potential, but now as I can see that, the Indian International North-South Transport Corridor, that will help us in terms of reaching out to Russia much more effectively and much more, quickly and in a more competitive manner.
Okay,
So
I take your
think
comment.
that-
I'm going to Mr. Bansal at this moment. Mr. Bansal, I would like you to reply on energy, but also I want a small comment from you. They say the Russians have got wary of supplying equipment to China because what they do is, because of reverse engineering, they have actually managed to produce a lot of these products locally, and they have now become hesitant to supply to China. A small comment on that, and then you can speak on energy.
See, firstly, you must understand that most of the Russian Chinese equipment which China is actually producing, in fact, if you look at the Chinese aircraft and many of the military hardware, is nothing but actually reverse engineered old Soviet equipment. The Soviet aircraft, Soviet tanks, etc., they have been reverse engineered. So that's one problem. But the fact is, at this point of time, Russia is willing to sell to anybody. And for long, there were boundary dispute between Russia and China, their interests clashed, and as a result, China was absolutely a no-no. But the things have changed, and as was said earlier, because of the recent actions by the West, China and Russia have been edging closer.
Yes.
On many issues, you find the Russia and China on the same page, like on Syria and on many other issues. So they have been edging close. So I think Russia has to consider, Russia has started exporting to China, but this fear, especially on those equipment which Russia is exporting, it would not want to give it. And as a result, you will find by and large, the Russian exports to China have not been of the latest equipment, unlike that to India.
Okay.
Now coming to energy sector,
Yes.
nuclear energy is of course a very, very big issue. We have the Kudamkulam plants and we are actually looking for further cooperation. But in the past, OVL has collaborated, has invested heavily in, but what Ambassador Sajjanhar said is very important. With the north-south corridor coming in, there are a lot of newer opportunities. In fact, when you are looking at coal energy, there is coal, huge coal deposits in Mongolia, which are one of the finest in the world. But the transportation has been a problem. But if north-south corridor becomes a reality, because China has not really been permitting through transit of that coal. So maybe once north-south corridor comes up, you could start getting that high-quality coal as well, besides of course oil, petroleum and other energy sources are considered.
Okay. Now coming to a slightly more political or politico-diplomatic question, I'll go across to Ambassador Tayal. Ambassador Tayal, I would refer to an article which was written by Ambassador Sajjanhar in the month of May, and Ambassador Sajjanhar wrote that Modi will have to convince the US, Modi will have to convince Russia that its relationship with America is not at the cost of relationship with Russia, relationship with America. So how do you look at all this? Because this whole axis of India going closer to America, Russians shouldn't feel wary about it. he was putting to, you know, he says Modi should put this across to Russia.
I think Ambassador Sajjanar has made a very, very important point, and it is for our entire diplomatic establishment, Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, etc., to convince Moscow establishment and President Putin that our relations with Russia would continue to be as warm, as close, as friendly as they have always been, even if we seem to be coming closer to United States.
Okay.
And there is evidence. For instance, we have been very understanding of the Russian position on Ukraine. We understand that on Odessa, etc., Crimea, Russia has a historical, there is a history behind
Okay,
it,
I
and
take
there
your
is
point.
a
I'm
logic
going to
why
Ambassador
Russia has done
Sajjanar
something.
because you're running out of time.
So I believe that we have played our cards well.
Well, okay. Ambassador Sajjanar, I would like to quote verbatim from your article. Modi should make Putin appreciate that India's expanding ties with USA are neither at the expense of Russia nor are they in any way directed against Russia or detrimental to its interest. Do you think this remains a diplomatic challenge or would be conveyed when President Putin arrives in October?
No, it does continue to be a diplomatic challenge because, you know, we need to realize that the world of 2016 is very different from the world of 1970s and 1980s. Because after 1991, the disintegration of the Soviet Union, end of the Cold War, India has seen greater opportunities. We have been coming closer to the United States. This has made Russia wary. But, you know, even over the last 2 years, even when Prime Minister Modi has come to office, our relations with the United States, with Japan, etc., they have really expanded. They have really grown. And this has made Russia uncomfortable.
Okay.
So the challenge for us is both, number one, to tell them that our relations with the United States are not at their expense, they are not directed against them, and they will not in any way dilute.
That's an
our
important
very special and
comment
privileged
coming from
partnership with
Ambassador
them.
Sajjanar. I'm going to Mr. Bansal at this moment. Mr. Bansal, final closing comment from you.
See, I just wanted to say that there is no doubt that our growing closeness to US actually causes some anxiety in Russia. It's actually a challenge, and I think we have tried to, on many issues, we have been on the same page as Russians, be it Syria, be it on Crimea.
Okay.
And please understand, we have to function like Bismarck just prior to First World War, when Germany kept its relations, good relations with Austro-Hungarian Empire as well as with Russia, which were both fighting and contending for the same space.
We call for end of this discussion. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on today's discussion. So President Putin comes visiting to India for the BRICS summit at Goa and also for bilateral talks in October this year. Let us see how the talks goes and what is the outcome. We'll track it for you here on News World India. Thank you so much for joining us on today's discussion. Thank you.